In 1986, a 10-year-old boy named Juan Pedro Martinez, with dark hair and brown eyes, standing about 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighing around 114 pounds, disappeared under mysterious circumstances. His parents, Andres Martinez and Carmen Gomez, were his loving caregivers. Juan Pedro was deeply interested in the Basque region of Spain, sparked by something he learned in school. His father, Andres, aware of his son's fascination, promised him that they would visit the Basque region if he performed well in school. Motivated by this promise, Juan Pedro worked diligently and eventually earned the trip he had longed for. However, on June 25, 1986, Andres was assigned to deliver 20,000 liters of sulfuric acid from Cartagena to Bilbao, located in the Basque region. This trip was a perfect opportunity to fulfill his promise, so the whole family, Andres, Carmen, and Juan Pedro, set off together in the truck for the long journey. The trip was expected to take over 8 hours, covering more than 500 miles through challenging and narrow mountain passes. As they approached the Somo Sierra mountain pass, something seemed to go wrong. The details of what occurred inside the truck that day are unclear, and the events that followed remain shrouded in mystery. Witnesses described Andres driving erratically, which was unusual given the dangerous conditions of the mountain roads. At one point, the truck was reportedly traveling at an astonishing speed of around 90 miles per hour, far too fast for the steep and winding roads. Tragically, while attempting to navigate a sharp curve, the truck tipped over. The front of the vehicle collapsed upon impact, killing Andres and Carmen instantly. The sulfuric acid they were transporting began to spill, leading to small explosions. Emergency crews used large amounts of lime to absorb the acid and prevent it from contaminating nearby water sources. Initially, investigators believed the crash might have been caused by brake failure, but they soon discovered that the brakes were functioning correctly. This led to the conclusion that the accident was not just a typical motor vehicle crash, but rather, something more unusual had occurred. However, the strangest aspect of the situation was Juan Pedro's absence. Despite extensive searches in the surrounding area, there was no trace of the boy. However, missing posters for Juan Pedro were distributed widely, hoping that he might have wandered away from the crash site and was still alive somewhere. Reports soon emerged from witnesses claiming they saw a white Nissan Vanette near the crash site. Inside the van were a tall man with a mustache and a woman, both described as having a Nordic appearance. Witnesses said that the couple approached the wrecked truck, took a small package, and then quickly left the scene. However, these accounts have not been confirmed and might have been exaggerated as the story spread. Adding to the mystery, the truck's tachometer, which records the vehicle's engine revolutions per minute, was found intact. The data revealed that the truck had made 12 unexplained stops during its journey. These stops were brief and did not correspond to typical traffic patterns, with the shortest stop lasting only a second. Some speculate that Andres might have been trying to evade or signal to another vehicle, possibly the white Nissan seen at the crash site, but these ideas remain purely speculative without any concrete evidence. In the aftermath of the accident, numerous sightings of a boy resembling Juan Pedro were reported. The first sighting occurred in Bilbao, the family's intended destination. While most of these reports lacked verification, one particular sighting stood out. In May 1987, nearly a year after the accident, a blind woman entered a driving school in Madrid. The owner of the school noted that the woman, who appeared to be of Iranian descent, was seeking directions to the U.S. Embassy. She was accompanied by a boy around 10 years old who spoke Spanish with a local accent. When the school owner inquired further about the boy, the woman abruptly changed the subject. Later, the owner identified a photo of Juan Pedro as resembling the boy he saw that day. Numerous theories have emerged over the years about what might have happened to Juan Pedro. One theory suggests that he died in the crash along with his parents, and his body was dissolved in the sulfuric acid that leaked from the tanker. However, this theory was debunked, as it would have taken days for the acid to dissolve a body completely, and the truck was searched shortly after the crash, leaving insufficient time for such a process to occur. However, another theory posits that Juan Pedro was kidnapped by human traffickers, possibly connected to illegal activities. Some reports indicate that traces of illegal substances were found in the acid, leading investigators to suspect that Andres might have been involved in drug trafficking. The sighting of the man and woman at the crash site, allegedly taking a package from the truck, further fueled these suspicions. Yet another theory suggests that Juan Pedro may have sustained a head injury in the crash and wandered away in a state of confusion, possibly losing his memory. While investigators found no signs of injury within the truck, the chaotic nature of the accident has left open the possibility that something could have been missed. To this day, the fate and whereabouts of Juan Pedro Martinez remain unknown, leaving his disappearance one of Spain's most enduring and haunting mysteries. The case of Czna Zada is one of the most gruesome and disturbing crimes to have taken place in Poland in 1998. Opinions about the case vary. Some believe it has been resolved, while others argue that significant questions remain unanswered, leaving the case only partially solved. However, Czna, a 23-year-old university student from Krakow, Poland, had been struggling with depression since the death of her father in 1996. Despite being described as a kind and gentle young woman, she could sometimes seem distant or cold. On November 12, 1998, Czna was scheduled for an appointment at a psychiatric clinic. Her mother planned to meet her there, but when Czna didn't show up, her mother grew increasingly worried. She contacted the police, but they were unable to act immediately, as not enough time had passed to declare Czna a missing person. When 24 hours finally elapsed, the police began their investigation, but they found no clues to her whereabouts. However, on January 6, 1999, a tugboat crew was sailing along the Vistula River when they noticed the propeller had become entangled in something. Assuming it was caught on tree branches, they stopped to inspect it. As they attempted to free the propeller, they discovered a strange, rubbery material tangled around it. Initially puzzled, one of the crew members managed to dislodge the material, only to realize in horror that it was human skin. The police were called to the scene, and DNA tests later confirmed that the skin belonged to Czna Zada. Initially, investigators theorized that Czna had somehow fallen into the river and been caught by the propeller. However, this theory was quickly dismissed when they noticed that the skin had been meticulously cut at the points where the head and limbs would have connected to the torso. This led investigators to the horrifying conclusion that Czna had likely been skinned alive. One of the most disturbing details of the case was that the skin had been cut in such a way that it resembled a one-piece swimsuit. This grotesque discovery led many to believe that the killer had a twisted obsession with wearing another person's skin. Authorities speculated that Czna had been subjected to weeks of torture before she was finally killed. As the investigation continued, more unsettling details emerged. Czna's body was eventually found, and it showed signs of extreme violence. She had been stabbed numerous times and was sexually assaulted both before and after her death. The brutality of the crime left investigators and the public horrified. At first, the police struggled to find leads, but a potential connection was discovered when they realized there had been another murder in the same city that bore eerie similarities to Czna's case. A man named Władysław, who lived in Krakow, had murdered his father and then removed his face to wear it like a mask. The similarities between the two cases, both involving the removal and wearing of human skin, were too striking to ignore. However, despite the similarities, there was no concrete evidence to link Władysław to Czna's murder. However, in 2017, nearly 2 decades after Czna's remains were found, the police arrested a man named Robert Jankowski, who was 52 years old at the time. Robert had been on the police's radar for a while, but like Wladislaw, there had been little evidence to charge him. The breakthrough came when one of Robert's friends wrote a letter to the police, suggesting that Robert might be Czna's killer. With this new lead, the police obtained a search warrant for Robert's apartment. During their search, they discovered tiny but significant traces of blood in his bathroom. Psychological evaluations of Robert indicated that he fit the profile of someone capable of committing such a horrific crime, including the bizarre desire to wear another person's skin. Additionally, Robert was well known for his misogynistic behavior and had a history of harassing women. One particularly disturbing detail was that Robert was often seen visiting Czna's grave, despite having no known connection to her. Further investigation revealed that Robert had worked in a laboratory where he dissected human bodies. He had even lost his job after allegedly killing all the rabbits during one of his shifts. Although the police were confident that Robert was involved in Czna's murder, they also suspected that he might not have acted alone. Despite their suspicions, they have been unable to identify any additional accomplices. The case of Czna Zada remains one of Poland's most chilling and partially unresolved mysteries, leaving many questions unanswered and the full truth elusive. On October 22, 1986, Bambi Bradley vanished in Leesville, Louisiana, under mysterious circumstances. The last known sighting of her was at a local convenience store where she purchased a drink and used the pay phone. What happened afterward remains unclear, but authorities speculate that she may have attempted to walk home. In 1986, Bambi left her hometown of Bartlett, Tennessee, after a difficult breakup, seeking a fresh start. She moved to Leesville to live with her older brother, Rody, who was 38 years old at the time. Rody had lived in Leesville for many years and was happy to have Bambi join him at the Twin Pines trailer park. For Bambi, who had spent her entire life in Tennessee, this move marked a significant change. Seeking some comfort in this unfamiliar place, Bambi decided that living with her brother would help her adjust. Bambi quickly adapted to her new life in Louisiana, thanks to her friendly and outgoing nature. She made new friends, found a job at Pines Chrysler, a local car dealership, and even began dating someone from the area. She enjoyed going out to nightclubs with her friends and seemed genuinely happy with her new life. However, one October night in 1986, Bambi felt restless. Her brother was out, leaving her alone in their trailer, which had neither a phone nor a car. Bored and eager to get out, Bambi decided to walk to a nearby convenience store around 10 p.m. She visited Super Sam's, where she bought a soda and used the store's phone to call the Pit Grill, a bar where her brother was. Bambi asked the person who answered the phone to let Rody know she needed the car to visit her boyfriend. The employee agreed and relayed the message. At about 10:30 p.m., Rody received Bambi's request. Not ready to leave the bar yet, he asked a friend to accompany him home so that he could drop off the car for Bambi and then return to the bar with his friend. When Rody arrived at the trailer, he found it empty but noticed Bambi's soda on the floor, indicating she had returned from the store. Assuming she had gone to a neighbor's and would be back soon, Rody left the car keys and returned to the bar. After the bar closed, Rody and his friend returned to the trailer just after 2 a.m. The car remained parked where he left it, and Bambi's drink was still in its place, but there was still no sign of her. Initially thinking she might have caught a ride with a friend, Rody grew increasingly worried when she didn't return the next morning and missed work. Bambi was known for being responsible and had never missed a day of work before. Panic-stricken, Rody contacted the police to report his sister missing. Detectives soon found witnesses who had seen Bambi walking along Louisiana Highway 8 after leaving Super Sam's, but no one had seen her after that. There was no evidence of a struggle or anything unusual inside the trailer, making the investigation even more challenging. In 1989, the Vernon Parish Sheriff's Office began exploring a potential link between Bambi's disappearance and the mysterious vanishings of two other women in the area, who were later found murdered. One of these cases involved Karen Hill, a 21-year-old who worked at a convenience store on Fort Polk. Karen disappeared in November 1988, and her body was found the next day, tied to a tree and shot, about 10 miles from where she was last seen. The second case occurred in June 1989, when 23-year-old Pamela Miller went missing in Leesville. Her remains were discovered 5 months later, also near Fort Polk. A soldier stationed at Fort Polk, named Samuel Galbraith, was eventually arrested and charged with manslaughter in Karen Hill's case. However, both Pamela Miller's murder and Bambi Bradley's disappearance remain unsolved. Despite the resolution of Karen's case, many believe that all three cases are connected, though law enforcement has yet to establish definitive links. By 1990, the Vernon Parish Sheriff's Office had largely abandoned the investigation into Bambi's disappearance. The case went cold until March 2018, when a new team of detectives decided to re-examine the evidence. These detectives, like their predecessors, suspected that Bambi's case might be related to other cases involving missing or murdered women in the area. For Bambi's family, the painful reality is that she is likely no longer alive. However, they continue to hope for some form of closure, longing to understand what happened to her on that fateful night after she disappeared. Denise Plum, an 18-year-old standout athlete and high school track star, disappeared in 1986 in Connersville, Indiana. Denise had her sights set on earning a track scholarship for college, but her future was tragically cut short. She had been living with her parents and younger sister, looking forward to her senior prom, despite having recently ended a 3-year relationship with her boyfriend, Sean McClung. According to her mother, Denise seemed more positive and sociable after the breakup, though some of her friends described it as a messy parting. However, on March 27, 1986, Denise attended a bonfire party held on a rural farm in the Glenwood area. What started as a small gathering quickly grew into a large event, with 200 to 300 students in attendance. Denise stayed for a while before heading home. The next day, she realized she had left her purse at the party. Around 12:30 p.m., she called a few friends, expressing her discomfort about returning to the farm alone and asking if anyone could accompany her. Unfortunately, none of her friends were available, so Denise decided to go by herself. Before leaving, Denise briefly spoke with a neighbor, marking the last confirmed sighting of her. When Denise didn't return home for dinner that night, her parents, David and Judy Plum, grew concerned. It was unusual for Denise to miss family meals, and she had been gone for hours. By 8:30 p.m., they reported her missing to the local police. However, the police were initially dismissive, suggesting that Denise was likely just out doing teenager things and that the family was overreacting. Realizing that the authorities weren't taking the situation seriously, Denise's family launched their search. They reached out to everyone they knew, asking if anyone had seen her. During the search, Denise's cream-colored 1981 Bic Regal was found abandoned near the farm where the party had been held. Denise's cousin had returned her purse to the Plum residence at 1:30 p.m., just an hour after she had left to retrieve it herself. The farmer who owned the property told police that Denise's car had been parked there from 12:30 p.m. to 1:15 p.m. but hadn't moved. Despite being only 3 miles from the bonfire site, there was no indication of why Denise would have been in that area. The police searched the area and questioned those who had attended the party, but no one recalled seeing Denise that day. Later, Denise's mother, Judy, received a tip from one of Denise's friends, who claimed to have seen her at the Fashion Bug clothing store on the day she disappeared. However, the description of what Denise was wearing didn't match what she had on before she went missing, leading investigators to dismiss the sighting as unreliable. Denise's ex-boyfriend, Juan McClung, was questioned by police. He claimed that the last time he saw Denise, she was alive, and he was never labeled a suspect. However, investigators noted that Juan didn't actively participate in the search for Denise, nor did he show any signs of emotional distress over her disappearance. Shortly after Denise went missing, Juan moved to Arizona, raising further suspicions. However, the case was initially led by Detective Lieutenant Ted McQuinley of the Fayette County Sheriff's Department, who happened to be Denise's father's cousin. Because of this personal connection, McQuinley kept the family updated on every development, no matter how small. However, the investigation took a disturbing turn on August 10, 1988, when a woman from Norfolk, Virginia, contacted Judy and David, claiming to be their daughter. Both parents stated that the voice on the phone sounded eerily similar to Denise's. Judy was especially convinced, noting that the call came on her day off, which she believed was a deliberate attempt by Denise to ensure someone would be home to answer. The family was filled with hope, and law enforcement spent 2 weeks trying to trace the Norfolk phone number. The Plum family even traveled over 750 miles to Norfolk, hoping to reunite with Denise. Working with local police, they conducted a citywide search, eventually tracing the call to a resident in an apartment complex. It turned out that the caller was a 19-year-old who had previously lived in Connorsville. Initially, she denied making the call, but eventually, she confessed to orchestrating a cruel hoax. She later admitted that she had never seen Denise and had made up the entire story. This revelation devastated the Plum family, turning their hopes into despair. The case remained cold until September 7, 2018, when new information emerged suggesting that Denise might have been murdered, with her body possibly buried in a rural area. The Mary Gray Bird Sanctuary became the focal point of a renewed search after a tip from the ex-girlfriend of a former person of interest. Various agencies, including the Fayette County Sheriff's Department, the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, and the Indiana Department of Homeland Security, joined forces to investigate the site. They used cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar, but heavy rainfall delayed the search, and ultimately, it yielded no new evidence. Over the years, investigators repeatedly returned to Denise's ex-boyfriend, Juan McClung, but each time, they found no conclusive evidence linking him to her disappearance. However, in July 2020, during a 3-hour interview, Juan made a shocking confession. He admitted to killing Denise in 1986. Despite this, he refused to disclose the location of her body. According to Juan, the two had gotten into an argument, and with the help of friends, he had hidden her body for over 3 decades. However, Juan had previously served jail time for several domestic violence charges unrelated to Denise's case. His confession was part of a plea deal that would have granted him immunity for the crime and dropped 2 other charges. However, because he refused to reveal the location of Denise's body, the deal was voided. Juan died in September 2020 at the age of 56 from a terminal illness, taking the secrets of what truly happened to Denise to his grave. Despite Juan's confession, the police have no physical evidence linking him to the crime, and Denise Plum's body remains missing. To this day, the full truth behind her disappearance and murder remains unknown, leaving her family and the community without the closure they so desperately seek. The case of Harry Horse, whose real name was Richard Horn, and his wife Mandy has been a subject of intense debate and speculation since the tragic events unfolded. Richard was a well-known cartoonist and author who wrote under the pen name Harry Horse. His wife, Amanda, often called Mandy, was battling a terminal illness, and for the last 2 years of her life, Richard devoted himself to caring for her. He even took an extended leave from his weekly column in a Sunday newspaper to spend more time with her. On January 9, 2007, 2 of Richard and Mandy's friends visited their home and noticed that Richard was behaving strangely. At one point, he remarked, "It's a wonderful night for a killing," which left the friends uneasy. Mandy also repeatedly asked them not to leave, pleading with them to stay, but they had to decline. Despite her insistence, the friends eventually left. The next morning, at 9:40 a.m., the same friends were on their way to the airport to catch a flight home when they realized one of them had forgotten a jacket at Richard and Mandy's house. They decided to stop by and retrieve it. When they arrived, they knocked on the door, expecting Richard to answer, but there was no response. After waiting for a while, they found the door unlocked and decided to enter the house. What they discovered inside was horrifying. The couple's pets, a dog and a cat, had been stabbed to death, and nearby were the bodies of Richard and Mandy lying side by side on their bed. Mandy had been stabbed over 30 times, and Richard had nearly 50 stab wounds. The most shocking detail was that Richard's genitalia had been mutilated. The gruesome scene led many to speculate that this was some sort of twisted Romeo and Juliet pact. However, this theory was quickly overshadowed by another explanation. Media reports suggested that Richard might have taken a large amount of various substances before stabbing Mandy repeatedly until the knife broke, then turning the knife on himself in a frenzied state. While it was known that Richard struggled with mental health issues, many who knew him found it hard to believe that he was capable of such an act. To add to the mystery, the autopsy revealed no signs of drugs in Richard's system, leading to questions about how he could have inflicted nearly 50 wounds on himself and then mutilated his own body. Some have speculated that the two friends who visited the couple the night before might have had a role in the tragedy and were not entirely forthcoming with the police. Others believe that the combination of Richard's deteriorating mental health and the devastating reality of losing his wife pushed him over the edge, leading to a possible psychotic episode. This case continues to baffle many, and discussions about it often lead to mentions of a video game Richard developed called Drowned God: Conspiracy of the Ages. Released in 1996, this science fiction adventure game is frequently brought up in conversations about Richard Horn, adding another layer of intrigue to an already complex and disturbing story. The truth behind what happened to Richard and Mandy remained shrouded in mystery, leaving much room for speculation and debate. In 1985, the tragic and mysterious murder of Doug Cleaves, a double amputee and single father, shocked the community of Anchorage, Alaska. Doug had recently gone through a bitter divorce with his wife, Charlotte, which became even more contentious when the issue of custody over their son, Robert, arose. Accusations flew, including claims that Doug was a cocaine user, but despite these allegations, the court ultimately granted him custody of Robert. Doug, a construction worker by trade, faced another life-altering challenge when he was involved in an electrical accident at work, leading to the amputation of both his legs. Seizing the opportunity, Charlotte petitioned for custody of Robert, arguing that Doug's disability made him unfit to care for their son. However, the court denied her motion, and while Doug remained in the hospital, caregivers looked after Robert. By September 1985, Doug was released from the hospital and began the arduous process of adjusting to his new life. His sister Susan, who had quit her job to help him transition back into everyday life and care for Robert, moved in with them. Doug, known for his determination, was eager to regain some normalcy and independence, though the rehabilitation process was frustrating for him. One nurse who worked with Doug noted that he was difficult at times because he wanted to progress quickly and was understandably angry, a common response to such a traumatic life change. Despite his struggles, Doug was making strides towards rebuilding his life. But on the night of October 19, 1985, everything took a devastating turn. Doug was at home with Susan, his girlfriend, and a neighbor, enjoying a meal of crab legs and watching TV. Robert had just left to spend the weekend with his mother. Around midnight, someone began knocking aggressively on the door. Susan went to see who it was and, upon cracking the door open, was met with a terrifying sight, a masked figure standing there, holding a hunting rifle. In a split second, Susan tried to slam the door shut, but the intruder wedged the rifle through the gap and forced his way inside. The masked assailant, dressed in a tan trench coat and combat gloves, immediately headed straight for Doug, who was lying on the floor without his prosthetic legs. As soon as their eyes met, Doug began pleading for his life, saying, "Hey, don't shoot. I understand what's going on. We can work this out." But the shooter showed no mercy, firing 5 shots into Doug before fleeing the scene. The police arrived at the scene around 12:20 a.m. Susan described the shooter as thin, between 5 feet 6 inches and 5 feet 8 inches tall, and noted that due to the build and appearance, the shooter could have possibly been female. However, Doug's murder quickly faded from public attention, overshadowed by a string of 6 other shootings in the area that October. The circumstances of the murder suggested that Doug might have known the shooter, or at least understood the motive behind the attack. One theory proposed that the murder was connected to a drug deal gone wrong. Charlotte had previously accused Doug of using cocaine and claimed he sold marijuana, though there was little evidence to support these claims. Doug was known to smoke marijuana occasionally, but he was not associated with hard drug use. Another theory revolved around money. Doug's workplace accident had occurred on a construction site, making his employer liable and setting him up for a substantial financial settlement. Doug had already shared plans with his sister to use the money to start an air taxi business in Alaska, intending to pass it down to Robert when he was older. Given the bitterness between Doug and Charlotte, some speculated that Charlotte might have hired a hitman to kill Doug to gain custody of Robert and inherit the money he was set to receive. While accusing Charlotte might seem like reaching for straws, it's a common investigative practice to consider those who stand to gain from a murder. After Doug's death, Robert was placed in Charlotte's care, and she was never officially suspected of involvement in the crime. In 1989, an Anchorage homicide investigator revealed that they had built a strong case against a suspect they believed was responsible for Doug's murder. However, they were determined to gather the best possible evidence to ensure a foolproof case, which led them to delay pressing charges. To this day, no one has been charged in connection with Doug Cleave's murder, leaving the case unsolved and the true motives behind his death a lingering mystery. On January 27, 1993, a group of children were playing in the woods adjacent to Wayne Fitzgerald State Park in Jefferson County, Illinois. Depending on the source, the number of children ranged between 2 and 5. They were enjoying their time exploring the wilderness, as there wasn't much else to do in the area. However, their day took a terrifying turn when some of the kids stumbled upon something unimaginable, a human head partially hidden in the bushes. Panic and fear set in, and the children ran out of the woods in search of an adult to tell about their shocking discovery. Authorities were quickly contacted, and investigators arrived on the scene. Despite a thorough search, the rest of the body was nowhere to be found, leaving the police with only a portion of the victim to work with. With no other evidence to go on, the identity of the victim remained a mystery, and she was given the name Jane Doe. Medical examiners determined that the woman had a condition known as torticollis, or wry neck syndrome, which caused her head to twist to one side. It was unclear whether she had suffered from this condition since childhood or if it had developed more recently, possibly as a result of a serious car accident. The victim was described as having brown hair that would have reached her shoulders. With little more than this to go on, the case quickly went cold. No one came forward to identify the woman, and for years, her identity remained unknown. However, fast forward to 2022, when advancements in genealogy testing finally revealed the identity of Jane Doe. She was Susan Lund, a woman who had disappeared on Christmas Eve in 1992. Susan had stopped by a grocery store in Clarksville, Tennessee, and vanished without a trace. She was a mother of 3, 2 daughters, aged 4 and 2, and a 6-year-old son. Her husband was in the military and stationed at Fort Campbell. Tragically, it was also determined that Susan was pregnant at the time of her disappearance. The revelation of Susan's identity brought both relief and heartache to her family. During a public announcement, Susan's sister expressed how grateful her children were to finally learn that their mother hadn't abandoned them. She said, "They're just so grateful to know that she didn't leave them willingly." For her son, who was 6 years old when she disappeared and in his 30s when her identity was discovered, the news was particularly significant. He admitted that he had harbored deep resentment and anger towards his mother, believing for years that she had walked out on her family. He confessed, "I thought she left us. I always thought she didn't want us anymore, me and my 2 sisters. But it wasn't true." One of Susan's daughters also spoke out, addressing the false rumors that had circulated about their father, who had been wrongly suspected by some of being involved in her disappearance. She defended him, saying, "Was my dad perfect? No, but he's my dad, and I know he didn't do this. He was with us the night my mom was taken." However, when Susan initially went missing, a search party was organized, but it only lasted for about 2 weeks. The case was eventually dropped by investigators after reports surfaced claiming that Susan had been seen in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. The police believed that she had left of her own accord and didn't feel it was their place to intervene. One detective even remarked, "She's still out there, and she's over 18, so she can come and go as she pleases," a statement that now seems baffling given the tragic outcome. Less than 2 weeks after Susan's disappearance, her severed head was discovered in Illinois, but at the time, no one knew it belonged to her. There were reports of sightings that suggested she had been seen in Louisville, wearing the same clothes she had on when she left home. She was also said to have lost a significant amount of weight, and her face had turned pale. Her husband, Paul, even went to a newspaper to issue a public plea, saying, "Sue, if you're reading this, please come home. We all miss you and love you." Now that Susan has been identified, her family can find some solace in knowing she didn't abandon them. However, the question of who killed her remains unanswered, and investigators continue to search for her killer. To this day, the rest of Susan Lund's body is still missing, leaving her family and authorities with many unresolved questions. The case of Count Xavier Dupont de Ligons has sparked intense debate and speculation since it first came to light. Xavier, a businessman, and his wife, Agnes, lived with their children, Thomas, Anne, Benoit, and Arthur, Agnes's son from a previous relationship, in an affluent neighborhood on 55 Boulevard Schumann in Nantes, a city on France's Atlantic coast. The family was well regarded in their community, and their home was often described as lively and welcoming. Xavier was a successful and charismatic figure, known for his ability to connect with people and his sharp sense of humor. Agnes worked at a Catholic school, while their 21-year-old son Arthur attended a private Catholic college. Thomas, 18, was a reserved young man with a passion for music. 16-year-old Anne was a catalogue model and an excellent student, while 13-year-old Benoit, who attended the same school as Anne, shared his brother's interest in music. On Monday, April 11, 2011, the family's neighbor, Estelle, who frequently provided services like clothing alterations and ironing, noticed something unusual. The house was locked, the blinds were closed, something the family never did, even during vacations, and there was a note on the mailbox instructing the mail carrier not to leave any mail. After 2 days with no signs of the family, Estelle became concerned and contacted the police. When local authorities arrived on Wednesday, April 13th, they found the front door locked and the blinds still drawn. They enlisted a locksmith to gain entry to the house. Inside, everything appeared normal, although some beds were missing sheets and a few closets were open. The police initially concluded that the family had left voluntarily and did not see any need for a formal investigation. However, Estelle remained uneasy. She noted that all of the family's cars, except one, were still at the house. Despite her concerns, the police continued to dismiss the possibility of foul play. The following day, letters from Xavier and Agnes were received by friends and family, explaining that Xavier had been recruited by American agents for a covert mission against an international drug ring. Although the letters were perplexing, the family's esteemed reputation led many to believe the story. Xavier's brother, Bruno, trusted his sibling based on their close relationship and shared noble lineage, which was important to their prestigious family. Xavier and Agnes had met in the early 1980s when Xavier was 20 and Agnes was about 17. They quickly fell in love, but Xavier's desire for adventure led to a breakup. When he returned a year later, he found that Agnes was pregnant by another man. Defying societal norms, Xavier chose to marry her and adopt the child, which earned him both admiration and criticism. While many of Xavier's friends and family believed the story in the letters, Agnes's family was more skeptical. On April 15th, the police returned to the house for a more thorough investigation. They discovered that some family photos were missing, but nothing else seemed out of place. Despite these findings, Agnes's family remained convinced that something was wrong and urged the police to continue investigating. The police made another visit on April 18th, and yet another on April 19th, but it wasn't until their sixth visit, on April 21st, that a police lieutenant noticed something unusual under the terrace in the garden. Digging beneath the terrace, the police uncovered large plastic trash bags tightly sealed with tape. Inside these bags were several bodies wrapped in blankets and duvets, with small religious icons, such as candles and crosses, placed beside them. The first grave contained the bodies of Agnes, Arthur, Benoit, and the family's 2 dogs. Thomas's body was found in a separate grave. Xavier's body, however, was not found, making him the prime suspect. An international warrant was issued for his arrest, but many of his friends found it hard to believe that Xavier could be capable of such a horrific crime. They insisted they knew him too well for such an act to be conceivable. Autopsies revealed that the children had been given sleeping pills before they were killed, while Agnes did not have any substances in her system. She did, however, use a sleep apnea machine, which had been shut off at 3 a.m. on either April 3rd or April 4th. Investigators believe that Agnes was likely the first victim, followed by the children, who were all killed with a .22 caliber rifle. Despite the use of a firearm, none of the neighbors reported hearing anything suspicious, leading investigators to believe they were dealing with a highly intelligent and calculated killer. As police began piecing together the timeline, it appeared that Xavier had been on the run during this period, although he didn't seem to be in a hurry or hiding. He withdrew money using his bank card, was caught on security cameras, and visited several restaurants where he used his credit cards. There was speculation that he might have been preparing to take his own life, as family murderers sometimes do. It seemed as if his journey was a farewell to his past life, with Xavier visiting locations significant to his family's history, places where he and Agnes had lived during their early years of marriage, and where their children had been born. The last confirmed sighting of Xavier was on April 14th, when he spent the night at a Formula One hotel in Roqueroun-sur-Argens. Surveillance footage captured him crossing the hotel parking lot, carrying a bag with a long object inside, believed to be the rifle used in the murders. The area where Xavier was last seen is surrounded by cliffs and mountains, leading some to speculate that he might have walked into the wilderness and committed suicide. Initially, the police supported this theory, but after extensive searches yielded no trace of him, doubts began to emerge. Despite the police's initial belief that Xavier took his own life, many others entertained the possibility that he managed to deceive everyone and successfully escape. To this day, his whereabouts remain unknown, and the case continues to captivate and mystify those who follow it. Nicole Louise Morin, born on April 1, 1977, was the only child of Art and Jeanette Morin. At the time of her disappearance, she lived with her mother on the 20th floor of an apartment building in Toronto. Nicole was described as a cheerful, playful child, full of imagination, and often engaged in creative games with her friends. On the morning of July 30, 1985, around 11 a.m., Nicole left her apartment to meet a friend in the building's lobby. The two girls had plans to go swimming at the pool located at the back of the complex. Before leaving, Nicole used the intercom to communicate with her friend, assuring her that she would be down shortly. However, there's some uncertainty about whether Nicole was last seen entering the elevator or walking down the hallway. Tragically, Nicole vanished that day and was never seen again. About 15 minutes after she left her apartment, her friend buzzed the intercom to ask where she was. Janet, who ran a small childcare business from home, informed her that Nicole had already left and might be playing with other children at the back of the building. Unfortunately, it wasn't until several hours later that Janet realized Nicole was missing, prompting her to call the police around 3 p.m. The police quickly mobilized, searching the apartment building and the surrounding area, going door to door in the complex, which housed 429 units. During their investigation, they spoke with a woman who claimed to have seen Nicole either waiting for or entering the elevator. But after that point, no one knew what had happened to her. Authorities set up roadblocks in nearby neighborhoods and used police vehicles with loudspeakers to ask the public to help find Nicole. The local Crime Stoppers group assisted in creating and distributing flyers throughout Toronto, and to this day, a 5-figure reward remains offered for any information that could lead to her whereabouts. Police also questioned several known sex offenders in the area, but none appeared to be connected to Nicole's disappearance. Nicole's family and close friends were also ruled out as suspects. It seemed as though the entire city of Toronto was on alert, searching for any sign of Nicole. However, a puzzling detail emerged after her disappearance, a sentence in Nicole's diary that read, "I'm going to disappear." Given Nicole's age of 8 and her vivid imagination, the police were unsure how to interpret this. Children often create stories or are influenced by things they see on TV or read in books, so it was difficult to determine whether this entry had any real significance. In recent years, there have been renewed efforts to uncover the truth about what happened to Nicole. Organized searches using cadaver dogs have been conducted in her neighborhood. According to a local news report, Thursday marked the first time that members of the Provincial Behavioral Medicine Health Unit, PBMH, searched for her remains. Attention has also turned to a possible eyewitness, a woman who, 2 years earlier, claimed to have seen Nicole on the morning she disappeared, accompanied by a man she knew. This led to speculation that the police might have overlooked someone Nicole was familiar with at the time of her disappearance. Some even wonder if her case could be connected to other disappearances. If Nicole is still alive today, she would be in her mid-40s. Despite the passage of time, her case remains one of Toronto's most haunting mysteries, with her family and the community still seeking answers and hoping for closure. Israel Keyes was born on January 7, 1978, in Richmond, Utah, a small town with a population of around 3,000 people. He would later become one of the most notorious serial killers in U.S. history. Raised in a large Mormon family, Keyes was one of 10 children. His parents were extremely protective, sheltering their children to an extent that may have contributed to shaping Keyes' disturbed personality in his later years. The family eventually moved to Washington State, settling in Colville. Shortly after arriving, they began attending a church known as the Ark, which was infamous in the area for promoting racist ideologies. This environment is believed to have had a profound impact on Keyes' impressionable mind. One of their neighbors, Chevy Kehoe, grew up to be a violent white supremacist and criminal. Chevy's actions were heinous. He murdered his wife and 8-year-old daughter. Several members of his family shared similar beliefs and behaviors, creating a community that was far from stable. Keyes seemed to follow in their footsteps, developing a fascination with violence, which he first directed toward animals. At the same time that Keyes lived in Colville, there was a 12-year-old girl named Julie Harris, a double amputee and a Special Olympics champion. In 1996, she went missing, and her body was later found near a river. Although Keyes never confessed to being involved, he was considered a primary suspect. He was around 18 years old at the time, and this period marked the beginning of his visible interest in serial killers like Ted Bundy. Keyes eventually moved out, though it's unclear whether he did so alone or with his family. He later ended up in New York, where he acquired a large plot of land. How he obtained it remains a mystery. In the late 1990s, a group of teenagers was intertubing near the Deschutes River when Keyes, who happened to be in the area, noticed them. He waited for one of them to be alone, and eventually, a girl aged between 14 and 17 became separated from the group. What happened next is largely unknown, but Keyes claimed to have kidnapped and sexually assaulted the girl before releasing her. However, the identity of this girl remains a mystery, as she never reported the incident. It's possible that the entire story was fabricated by Keyes, but he insisted it was the first crime he ever committed. Keyes later joined the U.S. Army, where he never admitted to committing any crimes. In 2001, after being honorably discharged, he returned to Washington and settled in the small fishing town of Neah Bay, which had a predominantly Native American population. It was here that Keyes met a woman with whom he had a daughter. To those around him, he seemed like a normal, contributing member of society, but this facade hid a much darker reality. After the birth of his daughter, Keyes shifted his focus away from targeting children and instead preyed on adults, specifically those without children. He admitted to killing at least one person after July 2011, but refused to disclose the victim's identity or location. Between 2001 and 2005, he also claimed to have killed a couple, implying that he buried them in a remote valley and used their car to leave the scene. In 2005 and 2006, Keyes killed again, but remained vague about the details, only revealing that he disposed of the bodies in Crescent Lake using his boat. Despite extensive searches, no remains were ever found. In 2007, Keyes left Neah Bay and began moving toward Alaska, making several stops along the way. Upon arriving in Alaska, he built a reputation as a skilled tradesman and appeared to lead a normal life. However, in 2008, Keyes began preparing what he called murder kits, which contained cash, weapons, and other tools for killing and disposing of his victims. He buried these kits in various locations he frequented. Keyes' killing spree continued until the early 2010s when he was finally apprehended. His final victim was an 18-year-old woman named Samantha Koenig. On the night of February 1st, a security camera captured Samantha working at a coffee stand. A man in a ski mask, later identified as Keyes, approached and ordered a drink. When Samantha handed it to him, Keyes pulled out a gun and zip-tied her, telling her that he planned to demand a ransom for her return. He made several stops before taking Samantha back to his house, where he sexually assaulted her before killing her. Authorities quickly spread the word about Samantha's disappearance. Eventually, Texas Highway Patrol officers pulled Keyes over, noting his resemblance to their suspect. Inside his vehicle, they found Samantha's phone and debit card. Up until that point, Keyes was unknown to law enforcement, but his arrest opened a Pandora's box, revealing the extent of his crimes. Investigators remain uncertain about the full scope of Keyes' murders, with some believing the number of his victims could be in the hundreds. On December 2, 2012, Keyes took his own life in his jail cell, taking many of his secrets with him. His suicide note, found after his death, was filled with rambling, disjointed thoughts, and numerous spelling errors. The note reflected his twisted view of the world, filled with disdain for society and a glorification of violence. Where will you go, you clever little worm, if you bleed your host dry? Back in your ride, as the night is still young, street lights push back the black, I need to rise off to the right, and a graveyard appears. Lines of stones, bodies moulder below. Turn away quickly, bob your head to the seat as straight through that stop sign you roll. A loaded truck with lights off slams into your broadside, your flesh smashed as metal explodes. You may have been free, and you loved living your lie, but fate had its scheme, and crushed like a bug you still die. Soon now you'll join those ranks of dead, or your ashes the wind will soon blow. Family and friends will shed a few tears, pretend it's off to heaven you go. But the reality is you were just bones and meat, and with your brain died also your soul. Send the dying to wait for their death in the comfort of retirement homes, quietly quickly say it's for the best, it's best for you so their fate you'll not know. Turn a blind eye back to the screen, soak in your reality shows, stand in front of your mirror, and preen in a plastic castle you call home. Land of the free, land of the lie, land of scheme, Americanize. Consume what you don't need, stars you idolize pursue what you admit is a dream, then it's American die. Get in your big car so you can get to work fast on roads made of dinosaur bones. Punch in on the clock and sit on your ass, playing stupid-ass games on your phone. The paper on your wall says you got smarts, the test you took told you so. But you would still crawl like the vermin you are once your precious power grid's blown. Land of the free, land of the lie, land of scheme, Americanize. Now that I have you tight, I will tell you a story. Speak softly in your ear so you know that it's true. You're my love at first sight, and though you're scared to be near me, my words penetrate your thoughts now in an intimate prelude. I looked into your eyes, they were so dark, warm, and trusting, as though you had not a worry or care. The more the game, the better potential to fill up those pools with your fear. Your face is framed in dark curls like a portrait, the sun shone through highlights of red. What color, I wonder, and how straight will it turn, plastered back with the sweat of your blood? There will be no more laughter here. I feel your body tense up, my hand now on your shoulder. Your eyes forget the lady called luck, she does not abide near me. For her powers don't extend to those who are dead. Let you be the master of your fate, knowing full well what's at stake. My pretty captive butterfly, colorful wings my hand smears, I somehow repaint them with punishment and tears. Violent metamorphosis, emerge my dark moth princess. I will come often and worship on the altar of your flesh. You shudder with revulsion and try to shrink far from me, I'll have you tied down and begging to become my Stockholm sweetie. Okay, talk is over, words are placid and weak. Back it with action or it all comes off cheap. Watch closely while I work now, and feel the electric shock of my touch. Open my trembling flower, or your petals I'll crush. Israel Keyes remains one of the most intelligent and calculating serial killers in history, leaving behind a trail of terror and unanswered questions. In Virginia, a loving husband and father named Robert disappeared 12 years ago, leaving his family in anguish. Robert was 33 years old when he vanished, and his absence deeply affected his wife, Tara, and their daughter, who was just 6 years old at the time. Now 18, she has grown up without him, missing out on countless moments they could have shared. His disappearance remains a mystery that continues to haunt them. Tara and Robert's relationship started when they were kids. They rode the same school bus and went to the same church. Tara secretly liked Robert, and her feelings were revealed one Easter Sunday, leading to their first date. From that day, they were inseparable. Robert was Tara's first love, and they built a life together, eventually getting married and having a daughter. On the morning of April 8, 2011, everything seemed normal. Tara made Robert his usual coffee and lunch and ensured he took his heart medication before he left the house. He drove off in Tara's 2004 Chevrolet Cavalier, and she believed he was heading to work. But that evening, Robert didn't come home. Tara's calls and texts went unanswered, and worry quickly turned to panic. Tara reported Robert missing to the Fluvanna County Sheriff's Office. The investigation, led by Major David Wells, revealed that Robert had been seen at E.W. Thomas Grocery in Palmyra, Virginia, around 8 a.m. that morning. His last phone call was made at 7:41 a.m., also in Palmyra. This confused Tara because Palmyra was in the opposite direction from Robert's work in Richmond. Further investigation showed that Robert wasn't scheduled to work that day. Instead, he was supposed to meet a male acquaintance but never arrived. Weeks later, Robert's car was found abandoned in a Target parking lot in La Plata, Maryland, over 100 miles from where he was last seen. Inside the car were some of his belongings, like his work tools and shirt, but his cell phone was missing. Unfortunately, surveillance footage from the parking lot did not provide any clues, as too much time had passed since his disappearance. Major Wells believes that Robert's disappearance involved foul play and that the people responsible knew Robert. "We think several people were involved and know what happened," Major Wells said. He hopes that with time, someone will come forward with the crucial information needed to solve the case. Tara has endured immense pain since Robert's disappearance. She had to raise their daughter alone and also care for her sick parents, who have both passed away since then. Despite these challenges, Tara's main focus has been finding answers for her daughter, who barely remembers her father. The uncertainty about Robert's fate adds to their sorrow, especially knowing those responsible may still be free. Robert's daughter, a teenager, has grown up without her father. She missed out on many special moments with him. Tara sees Robert in their daughter, which gives her comfort, but also a reminder of the man who is still missing from their lives. If Robert were still here, he would be 43 years old. At the time of his disappearance, he was between 5 feet 8 inches and 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighed about 200 to 250 pounds. Tara and her daughter continue to hope for answers, praying that someone will come forward with information to give them closure finally. Anyone with information about Robert's disappearance is encouraged to contact Major David Wells at the Fluvanna County Sheriff's Office at 434-589-8211. On the evening of March 2, 1998, in Albany, New York, a mystery began that has remained unsolved for decades. Suzanne Lyle, a 19-year-old sophomore at SUNY Albany, disappeared without a trace. Suzanne was studying computers, a field she was passionate about, and she was known for her quiet demeanor and deep curiosity about the burgeoning online world. Suzanne was 5 feet 3 inches with long, reddish-brown hair and blue eyes. She had a close relationship with her family and her boyfriend, Richard Condon. Suzanne's parents, Doug and Mary Lyle, spoke to her almost daily, and her disappearance sent shockwaves through not just her loved ones but the entire Albany community. On the day she vanished, Suzanne followed her usual routine, attending classes, taking a midterm exam, and working her shift at Babbage's, a software retailer at Cross Gates Mall, until closing at 9 p.m. After finishing her shift, she took a Capital District Transportation Authority bus back to campus, disembarking at Collins Circle around 9:45 p.m., a short walk from her dorm in Colonial Quad. This was the last confirmed sighting of her. The following morning, when Suzanne failed to follow her usual routine of contacting her boyfriend Richard, he grew worried and informed her parents. Doug and Mary immediately reported her missing to campus police. Initially, authorities considered the possibility that Suzanne might have taken a spontaneous trip without informing anyone, as such scenarios are statistically common. However, her parents were adamant that this was out of character, prompting a more serious investigation. By March 4th, a coordinated search effort involving campus police, the New York State Police, and volunteers was underway. No signs of a struggle or suspicious individuals were noted, leading to speculation about her sudden disappearance. Investigators delved into Suzanne's daily life and online activities, revealing a critical clue: her debit card was used at an ATM in a nearby convenience store around 4 p.m. on March 3rd, the day after she disappeared. Although the surveillance cameras did not capture the face of the person withdrawing the money, this individual had used Suzanne's PIN to withdraw $20. According to Richard, he and Susie were the only two people who knew it. Why Richard had her PIN at all is unknown. An individual who would come to be known as a Nike Man, a nickname derived from the hat he was wearing, was in the store right around the same time the withdrawal was made and was sought by police for questioning. Eventually, law enforcement concluded that his presence there that day was merely a coincidence and that he likely had no involvement in Susie's disappearance, although they couldn't definitively rule him out as a suspect. The identity of the person who made that withdrawal, and why they did it, remains a mystery. Conflicting accounts from friends and acquaintances added layers of complexity to the investigation. Some friends recalled Suzanne mentioning that she felt she was being watched in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. This left them worried that someone might have been following or surveilling her, although Suzanne never identified who it might be or why she felt this way. Others observed that she seemed distracted and more reserved than usual, hinting that something might have been troubling her. Despite these concerning observations, investigators struggled to pinpoint any clear suspects or motives. Suzanne's close friends and family were thoroughly questioned, and none provided definitive leads or identified anyone who might have wished her harm. Suzanne's boyfriend, Richard, played a central role in the initial investigation. He had been in regular contact with her and reported her missing when she didn't follow her usual routine of reaching out. At first, Richard appeared to cooperate fully with the authorities, providing an account of his activities on the night Suzanne disappeared. He claimed to have been at his residence, offering an alibi that seemed to hold up under initial scrutiny. However, as the investigation progressed, Richard's behavior became a point of interest for law enforcement. Despite his early cooperation, he later refused to take a polygraph test, a decision that raised eyebrows among the investigators and Suzanne's family. Richard's withdrawal from further cooperation and his refusal to engage with the police deepened suspicions, even though he maintained his innocence and his alibi was never conclusively disproven. This refusal, combined with the absence of any physical evidence linking him directly to Suzanne's disappearance, left the police in a difficult position. While Richard remained a person of interest due to his sudden reluctance to assist in the investigation, no concrete evidence tied him to the case. This left a cloud of suspicion hanging over him, contributing to the broader mystery and complicating the search for answers to Suzanne Lyle's disappearance. 2 months after Suzanne's disappearance, an unsettling discovery was made. Her old name tag from Babbage was found in the parking lot about 90 feet away from the bus stop. Oddly, it was on the opposite side of the parking lot from the direction of her dorm room. It wasn't the name tag she had been using when she disappeared, making its appearance even more puzzling. It's unknown how long it had been there or how it ended up there. In the weeks following her disappearance, investigators pursued 270 leads and searched about 300 acres, including wooded areas and nearby Rensselaer Lake. Despite these efforts, the investigation soon hit a dead end due to a lack of evidence. Several theories were explored. Some suggested that Suzanne might have been abducted after leaving the bus, possibly by someone familiar with her routine. The location of her name tag near the bus stop lent some support to this theory. Richard, despite his alibi, remained a person of interest due to his later refusal to cooperate. Others speculated that Suzanne might have been taken by a stranger who targeted her after observing her routine. In 2005, investigators began looking at a man named John Regan as a person of interest in Suze's case. Regan had been arrested that year for trying to abduct a female student at Saratoga Springs High School, close to Suze's hometown of Ballston Spa. He was also awaiting trial for a 1993 kidnapping in Connecticut. Regan refused to talk to the police about Suze's disappearance. His possible connection to her case remains unproven, as no evidence has been found to link him to it. As time passed, Suzanne's parents became prominent advocates for missing persons. They founded the Center for Hope, aiming to support families of the missing and push for better laws. Their efforts contributed to the Protect Act of 2003, which included provisions for Suzanne's law, mandating the reporting of missing persons up to the age of 21 to ensure college students received the same attention as younger children. Despite ongoing efforts by the New York State Police and public interest, Suzanne Lyle's case remains unsolved. Annual vigils and continued media coverage keep her memory alive, as the community and her loved ones continue to seek answers, haunted by the enduring mystery of what happened to Suzanne Lyle. Karen Louise Wilson was born on February 2, 1963. During her high school years, she was a well-liked student and actively participated as a cheerleader. Karen dreamed of a career in the Foreign Service. By the age of 22, she was a senior at the University of Albany, majoring in political science and interning at the State Assembly. On March 27, 1985, Karen was preparing for an upcoming spring break trip to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which she planned to take with her roommate. Her preparations included a shopping trip to Colony Center, where she purchased a red and blue t-shirt. Karen had also scheduled an appointment at the tanning hut, but it appears she never arrived for her session. No one at the salon remembered seeing her, and her name was not checked off the appointment list. She was expected to return to her dorm that evening, but she never did. Initially, authorities believed Karen might have boarded a bus near the Butcher Block restaurant on Central Avenue and traveled to Fuller Avenue. This theory was later dismissed when it was determined she likely walked to Fuller Avenue instead. Witnesses reported seeing her in the area soon after her shopping trip. However, with no personal issues or conflicts in Karen's life that could explain her sudden disappearance, investigators soon suspected foul play. The theory that Karen had been abducted quickly gained traction. Police speculated she might have been taken near the 6 Mile Waterworks, a wooded area about half a mile from the University at Albany campus. This area was dark and sparsely traveled, making it a likely spot for an abduction without being noticed. A suspicious man was seen in the vicinity around the time Karen vanished, but he remains unidentified and is wanted for questioning as a possible witness or suspect. Despite thorough searches, none of Karen's belongings, her gray fabric pocketbook, blue nylon wallet, green and white plastic bag from Ups and Downs, or possibly a blue backpack with a yellow dress, have ever been recovered. Police explored every possible lead, including the idea that Karen might have gone to Florida despite the absence of evidence that she left New York. Investigators pursued numerous persons of interest, but many had solid alibis. They searched various locations for potential human remains, including a wooded area near the abandoned Tall Timbers Country Club, using cadaver dogs for 3 months. Another search was conducted near the 6 Mile Waterworks. However, one theory posited that Karen was abducted from or near her dorm parking lot. Investigators conducted a timed abduction scenario in a parking lot, finding that a large man could overpower and abduct a petite woman in as little as 10 seconds. Among the suspects was Jeffrey Williams, a serial killer with a history of targeting women. On January 23, 1988, he kidnapped 18-year-old Carolyn Lonksack from a group home in New York, where she worked. Carolyn's body was later found at the Tom Hannock Reservoir, showing signs of strangulation and stabbing. Physical evidence, including a spider medallion belonging to Williams, linked him to the crime. He was eventually sentenced to life imprisonment in 1995. Another suspect is Brad Woodworth, a 33-year-old truck driver in 1985, who also came under scrutiny after an anonymous tip led investigators to his address. Although his boss confirmed Woodworth reported to work at 4 a.m. on March 28, the day after Karen disappeared, making it unlikely he was involved, interest in him revived a year later. Another anonymous tip suggested Karen's body might be near the Tall Timbers Country Club, close to Woodworth's residence. Despite this, no conclusive evidence linked him to Karen's disappearance, and he died in a house fire in 2013. However, Karen's case resurfaced in 1998 when another University at Albany student, Suzanne Lyle, went missing under similar circumstances. Suzanne, then 20, disappeared on March 2, 1998, after leaving her job at Babbage's in Cross Gates Mall. The proximity of the two disappearances prompted speculation about a possible connection between Karen and Suzanne's cases. However, like Karen's case, Suzanne's disappearance remains unsolved. As of 2024, both Karen Wilson's and Suzanne Lyle's cases remain open, with no resolution in sight. Despite extensive investigations and numerous leads, both young women's fates remain unknown. Amy Billig was born on January 9, 1957, in Oyster Bay, New York, to Nathaniel Solomon and Susan née Czna Billig. Her father managed an art gallery, while her mother was an interior designer and art dealer. The Billig family practiced the Jewish faith. Amy's birth was a moment of profound joy for her mother, Susan, who had endured the heartbreak of 4 miscarriages before Amy's arrival. Susan often described Amy as a warm-hearted and spiritual young woman, deeply connected to nature and embodying the flower child spirit of her time. Amy had diverse and artistic interests. She loved playing the flute and guitar, was an avid reader, and enjoyed writing poetry. Additionally, she trained dolphins at the Miami Seaquarium, showcasing her unique connection with animals. Amy shared a close and affectionate relationship with her mother. Susan cherished these moments and often found herself in awe of her daughter, reflecting, "I would look at her and think, what did I do to deserve such a beautiful thing?" Concerned about the rising crime rates in New York City, the Billig family moved in May 1969. They settled in Coconut Grove, Florida, seeking a safer environment. Nathaniel Billig established an art gallery in their new location, while Susan continued her work as an art dealer and interior designer. Their new home was a comfortable middle-class residence. The Billings quickly became involved in various cultural organizations in their new community, contributing to the vibrant local scene. By the early 1970s, they were active participants in these groups, reflecting their commitment to the arts and community engagement. Amy, along with her younger brother Joshua, who was born on February 14, 1958, attended local private schools, receiving a solid education in their new surroundings. This move not only provided them with safety but also enriched their lives with new cultural and educational opportunities. On the afternoon of Tuesday, March 5, 1974, Amy Billig came home from school, had a yogurt, and then called her father to ask for $2 to cover a lunch date with friends at nearby Peacock Park. Her father agreed, and Amy changed her clothes and began hitchhiking to her father's art gallery on Commodore Plaza to borrow the money to meet her friends for lunch. Construction workers saw Amy hitchhiking at the corner of Poinciana Street and Main Highway in Coconut Grove, near her home, early that afternoon. Sadly, this would be the last confirmed sighting of her. Amy never made it to her father's gallery. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing a denim miniskirt and cork platform sandals. By the evening of March 5, Amy's mother, Susan, and her brother, Joshua, grew worried when she didn't return home. Their concern started when Amy's friends asked Susan why Amy hadn't shown up for their planned lunch. This worry turned into panic when Nathaniel, Amy's father, came home and shared that Amy had never arrived at his art gallery to borrow the money for lunch as she had said she would. When Susan called the local police, they assured her they would start an investigation if Amy wasn't back by the next morning. Detective Michael Gonzalez told her, "Don't panic. Call back if Amy isn't home by morning." By 6 a.m. the next day, Susan, now frantic, reported Amy missing again to the Miami Police Department, and this time, they launched an investigation. Law enforcement began investigating Amy's disappearance immediately after Susan's call on March 6, with both of Amy's parents, along with family and close friends, actively involved in the search. They quickly questioned Amy's friends and searched places she usually went to, but these efforts led to no results. Since Amy had few personal belongings with her when she vanished, investigators quickly determined her disappearance was likely against her will. Given Amy's habit of hitchhiking around the neighborhood, they suspected she might have willingly gotten into her abductor's vehicle. The only physical evidence found was Amy's Instamatic camera, which a college student, also hitchhiking, discovered on March 18 in a grassy area near the Wildwood exit on Florida's Turnpike, about 250 miles northwest of Miami. The camera's film was processed, but most of the photos were overexposed and didn't provide helpful information. One photo showed a light-colored pickup truck parked in front of a vine-covered building, and another showed a white van. Despite this, investigators couldn't locate the vehicles or identify the building in the pictures. In their desperate search for Amy, Susan and Nathaniel Billig took multiple steps, including hiring a private investigator, though this effort did not produce any solid leads. They printed and distributed hundreds of missing person posters across Miami-Dade County. They also handed out flyers in both English and Spanish throughout South Florida, hoping to find any information about Amy's whereabouts. The family kept a constant vigil near the phone, usually with Susan close by, in case Amy or her abductors called. Susan frequently contacted the Miami Police Department for updates and held several news conferences to keep the public aware of Amy's disappearance. On March 10, 5 days after Amy went missing, the first newspaper headline appeared in local papers. It mentioned that both the police and Amy's family suspected she might have been kidnapped, possibly by a motorcycle gang. That evening, a benefit concert raised $850 to help with search efforts, and a fund was established at a local bank for search expenses. A $1,000 reward was also offered for any information about Amy's whereabouts, leading to several tips from the public, but none were confirmed. In the weeks that followed, the Billig family received $2,000 in donations from friends, neighbors, and colleagues to support the search. A music festival organized by Amy's high school raised an additional $1,500 to aid in the private investigation. Former neighbors from New York also contributed $1,000 to help with the search efforts. Police and Susan Billig received tips indicating that Amy might have been abducted by members of the Outlaws or Pagans motorcycle clubs. Both gangs, known for violent crimes against women, had traveled through Coconut Grove on the day Amy disappeared, heading to a bike festival in Daytona. This theory was considered the most likely explanation for Amy's disappearance. On March 16, a caller identifying herself as Susan Johnson claimed Amy had been taken by the Outlaws Motorcycle Club. A family friend also reported hearing from a lawyer who had worked for the Outlaws about a rumor of a teenage girl recently abducted from Miami. With this lawyer's help, Susan arranged a meeting with 2 outlaw members, pleading for Amy's return. They assured her that if Amy was with the Outlaw Nation, they would return her. However, a few days later, they called to tell Susan to forget the whole thing. 16 days after Amy's disappearance, her family received a call demanding $30,000 in ransom, claiming she had been kidnapped. Susan, convinced by a subsequent call where a voice she believed to be Amy's pleaded, "Mama, Mama, please," borrowed the money from friends. A meeting was set up at the Fontainebleau Hotel on March 22nd. The caller was arrested when Susan refused to hand over the money without proof that he had Amy. The extortionists were 16-year-old twins, Charles and Lawrence Glasser, who had no connection with Amy's disappearance. Amy's parents received disturbing calls from a man claiming she had been abducted by a sex ring and held captive. This torment continued until 1995, when the FBI traced a call to Henry Johnson Blair, a U.S. Customs worker. Blair, who blamed his behavior on alcoholism and OCD, admitted to harassing the family but denied any knowledge of Amy's disappearance. He served 2 years in prison for his harassment, and Susan Billig settled a lawsuit against him for $5 million in 1992. Blair's connection to Amy was questioned because her journal mentioned a man named Hank, who asked her to run away to South America, a nickname and location tied to Blair. His van also resembled one in photos found in Amy's camera, but no conclusive link was ever made. In the early 1990s, a private investigator reported that an American biker in England tried to sell a mute American girl, which could have been Amy. However, this lead went nowhere after the investigator passed away. Theories about Amy's fate suggest either biker gang members or Blair might know the truth. Some believe the bikers were only harassing the family, while others think Blair's involvement is too coincidental. Unfortunately, Amy's parents never found answers. Nathaniel Billig passed away in the early 1990s, and Susan died in 2005. Amy's case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries and in Susan's book Without a Trace, The Disappearance of Amy Billig, A Mother's Search for Justice. Keisha Jacobs was born on January 1, 1995. From the Westover neighborhood of Richmond, Virginia, she lived with her mother, Toni, and her older brother, Devon. Toni held various customer service jobs to support her family, earning enough to maintain a stable and comfortable living situation. She ensured there was room for fun too, often taking Devon and Keisha to their favorite amusement park, King's Dominion, in Doswell, Virginia. Toni also valued family connections, so she frequently visited relatives on the coast with her children. Despite their age difference, Keisha and Devon were very close. Everyone was surprised by how well they got along, as their bond was stronger than most brother and sister relationships. In elementary and middle school, Keisha was a cheerleader, and her mom was the coach. She made close friends through cheerleading and school and was very loyal to them, sometimes too much. Even though she was tough, Keisha had a sensitive side and always made sure her friends were happy. Eventually, after graduating from high school, Keisha decided to stay in Richmond with her family until she figured out her plans. Over the next few years, she worked various jobs to gain experience and find her path. Toni admired how well her daughter managed her money, showing more responsibility than most 21-year-olds. Even though Keisha was popular, she didn't enjoy partying or staying out late. She would join in occasionally if invited, but she preferred other ways of socializing. The future looked bright, but no one knew the terrible events that awaited Keisha, Devon, and Toni. The family was so happy that it was hard to believe that everything would fall apart in a few years. On the evening of September 26, 2016, Keisha sent a text to her mother, informing her that she would be staying overnight with a friend and would reach out the next morning. Since Keisha was 21 years old, her mother, Toni, chose not to inquire further about who the friend was, respecting her daughter's privacy. However, on September 27th, while working as a dispatcher, Toni was expecting a call from her daughter to confirm she had returned home safely. Typically, Keisha would call during Toni's lunch break between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m. However, this time, no call came. Concerned, Toni tried calling Keisha's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She then called Devon, who mentioned that he had last spoken to his sister the previous night. When Toni got home that evening, she realized Keisha was still missing. Worried, she contacted Keisha's friends and visited their homes, but there was no sign of her. At around 2 a.m. on September 28th, after discussing it with her sister, Tony called the Richmond Police Department to report Keisha missing, explaining that it was unlike her daughter to disappear without informing anyone. The search for Keisha began with her friends and Tony going door to door in the neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen her. During this search, Tony learned that her daughter's friends had been with Keisha the night she vanished, despite earlier denials. When questioned, they admitted to dropping her off in Church Hill, about 10 minutes from her home, to meet someone, though they didn't know who it was. A specific friend revealed that he had driven Keisha to an unknown man's house, believing she would meet a mutual female friend there. He later claimed this was confirmed by a text from that friend. After speaking with him, Tony went to the man's house. A man at the house, who introduced himself as Otis, gave several accounts of the night of September 26th, admitting he knew Keisha and saw her that night, but claimed she left shortly after arriving. Tony then called the police, who searched the house but found no signs of Keisha. During her investigation, Tony discovered a woman who claimed that Otis had beaten her, held her captive and forced her into sexual acts. Tony fears her daughter might have faced a similar situation and suspects she could be a victim of sex trafficking. However, after finding Keisha's last known location, investigators searched the Church Hill area multiple times. They canvassed the neighborhood and handed out flyers. Keisha's phone records showed her phone had been off since the night she went missing. Her bank account was untouched, and her email and Facebook were inactive. Investigators have not found her phone ID or the overnight bag she had with her. To encourage new leads, her family and friends raised $3,000 for a reward leading to an arrest and conviction. There have been many reported sightings of Keisha, but none have been verified. Investigators do not believe she ran away or moved to another state. Over the years, Richmond police have been mostly silent, except for a 2017 announcement stating they believed Keisha was a victim of foul play. However, a few months after Keisha disappeared, Tony's only other child, her son Devon, was fatally shot at a Motel 6 in Richmond during a struggle. His killer was convicted and is serving time behind bars. Tony said, "I haven't fully mourned my son's death because I'm still fighting for Keisha," she said. "Knowing she's still out there keeps me going. As a mother, I have to fight for my daughter because no one else will fight for her like I do." However, the man suspected in Keisha Jacobs' 2016 disappearance in Richmond has pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in a Florida woman's death. Otis Tucker, 35, was facing the death penalty for the November 2022 murder of Ashley Fowler, a mother of 3 from Jacksonville. Tucker's plea deal included a conviction for tampering with evidence and could send him to prison for the rest of his life. The Richmond woman was 21 years old when she was last seen at a home in Church Hill where Tucker lived in September 2016. Investigators said they collected evidence of foul play from that home and questioned Tucker about Jacobs, but never charged in connection to her disappearance. Tony credits the Richmond Police Department and the local community for supporting her through Keisha's disappearance and Devon's murder. She often visits Maury Street Cemetery, where her son is buried. On the anniversary of Keisha's disappearance, her family releases blue balloons in her memory. They have also held rallies, including one near the house where she was last seen. Since her daughter's disappearance, Tony has become an advocate for families with missing loved ones. She has partnered with the Richmond Police Department and Mayor LeVar Stoney to observe Missing Persons Day every April. Keisha Jacobs went missing from the 3100 block of East Broad Street in Richmond, Virginia on September 26, 2016. She was 21 years old, last seen wearing pink and black Nike basketball sneakers, a pink headscarf, and black basketball shorts. She might also have been wearing a silver Pandora bracelet with a Vegas charm. At the time, she was between 5'0" and 5'3" tall and weighed around 100 to 110 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes. Her tattoos include a rose on her shoulder, paw prints on her right thigh, a flower on her right wrist, Tony beneath a heart on her left shoulder, and a leaf on her right foot. Her ears were pierced, and her fingernails were painted blue. Tony Jacobs has worked tirelessly to keep her daughter's memory alive and to ensure that her story is not forgotten. However, anyone with information about Keisha's disappearance is urged to call the Richmond Police Department's Major Crimes Unit at 804-646-0729. On the evening of March 2, 1986, 16-year-old Kevin Hicks left his home in Addiscombe, Croydon, South London, to buy a carton of eggs for his home economics exam the following day. This seemingly ordinary errand marked the beginning of a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Kevin was a typical teenager, described by those who knew him as happy and well-adjusted. He had no significant issues at school and had been actively applying for jobs in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. The day of his disappearance was unremarkable. He had spent time with his family at a disco. At around 8:30 p.m., he informed his mother that he needed to buy eggs for his exam, a short walk away from Spelling's community shop on Lower Addiscombe Road. Kevin left his home shortly after speaking with his mother. The last confirmed sighting of him was at 10:10 p.m. on Shirley Road, heading back towards his home. This was the last time anyone saw or heard from Kevin. Kevin's mother spent the entire night watching for him from an upstairs window, worried when he didn't return. His sister, Alex, went to school the next morning, initially believing that Kevin was just out and about. However, as the day progressed, her concern grew. Despite her distress, Alex was not allowed to participate in the search efforts, as it was deemed inappropriate for girls to be involved in case they encountered something disturbing. The family was forced to wait 24 hours before reporting Kevin missing, a stark contrast to modern protocols where parents can report a missing child immediately. As the days passed with no sign of Kevin, his family became increasingly worried. Alex, in particular, was distraught by the end of the week, as Kevin had no history of running away or mental illness. She began to believe that something terrible had happened to him. In the first 7 to 8 months following Kevin's disappearance, the family received a series of strange phone calls. The phone would ring, and when answered, there would be silence on the other end. Despite their pleas for Kevin to speak or meet them, the calls provided no answers. These calls continued sporadically for years, even reaching Alex at her workplace, CNA, on the specific days she worked there. After their mother passed away, Alex and her father noticed an extra bouquet at her funeral, which Alex believed might have been left by Kevin. This fueled her hope that he might still be alive and had attended the funeral. In December 2016, Alex was interviewed again, expressing how difficult Christmas and February, the months of both her and Kevin's birthdays, were for her. She appealed to anyone with information to come forward. Alex had also consulted psychics and mediums, who suggested that Kevin might have been abducted by an older man under the pretense of looking for a lost dog in Ashburton Park. Several psychics mentioned the presence of water, implying that Kevin might have drowned. The police have long suspected foul play in Kevin's disappearance. In 2016, they officially announced their belief that Kevin was murdered on the night he vanished. A £20,000 reward was offered for information leading to the discovery of his body or the prosecution of those responsible. Detective Inspector John Quaid of the Homicide and Major Crime Command stated that despite numerous inquiries over the years, Kevin's body has never been found, and there is no evidence that he is alive. They believe Kevin met someone that night who assaulted him and disposed of his body. An anonymous call to the Croydon Advertiser in 1996 claimed to know the location of Kevin's body, but no further information was provided. As of May 2013, there have been no new developments in the case. Kevin Hicks remains listed on the Metropolitan Police's website as a missing person, and the case is still open for any new information that might emerge. The disappearance of Kevin Hicks continues to haunt his family and the community, a cold case that leaves everyone wondering what truly happened on that fateful night in March 1986. On January 6, 1991, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the mysterious disappearance of 28-year-old Terry Slaugenhout began to unravel. Terry, a woman with a troubled past, left her apartment on North St. Clair Street, where she lived with her roommate, to go on a date. That evening, she returned home, preparing for a job interview the next day. Her roommate recalls Terry mentioning she needed to make a quick trip to a nearby convenience store, something she did often due to the lack of a phone in their apartment. However, that night, Terry never came back. As the hours turned into days, and then weeks, her sudden disappearance became increasingly alarming to those who knew and loved her. Worry began to spread among her family and friends as they realized that Terry was nowhere to be found. Terry's life was marked by hardship and struggle. She grew up in Aspinwall, Pennsylvania, and battled with alcohol addiction, a problem that started when she was just in the 10th grade. Despite her efforts to overcome this through multiple stays in rehabilitation, Terry often found herself relapsing. Her relationship with her mother was strained because of her addiction, yet they managed to stay in touch, especially on special occasions like holidays and birthdays. The last time her mother saw Terry was during Christmas in 1990 when Terry visited with an unknown man by her side. Terry had plans to reconnect with her brother on January 8th, but when she didn't show up, her absence was painfully obvious. Her concerned brother reached out to her roommate, who informed him that Terry hadn't been seen for days. This prompted the involvement of the authorities, who suspected that foul play might be involved. However, the investigation quickly hit a wall due to the lack of solid evidence and the absence of witnesses who could provide any insight into Terry's last movements before she vanished. Despite the passing years, Terry's mother holds onto the hope that her daughter is still alive, believing that she wouldn't just disappear without a trace. Yet, every new detail uncovered by investigators only adds to the enigma surrounding Terry's case, leaving her disappearance as one of Pittsburgh's enduring mysteries. It was December 29, 1999, in Vinita, Oklahoma, when best friends Ashley Freeman and Loria Bible, both teenagers, went missing. The day held special significance as it was Loria's birthday. Sometime late on the 29th or early on the 30th, the Freeman residence was set ablaze. A neighbor, alarmed by the sight of the house engulfed in flames, quickly called the fire department. Loria had informed her parents that she would be spending the day at Ashley's house, so when they were notified and arrived at the scene, they found the home reduced to ashes. Seeing Loria's car parked near the driveway, her parents feared the worst, assuming their daughter had perished in the fire. However, to their shock, Loria's body was not found. The only remains discovered were those of Kathy Freeman, Ashley's mother. In an interview with the media, Loria's mother, Laureen, recalled the moment she learned of the situation. "The county coroner told me there was only one body. I asked, have they found anybody else, and she said, no, they've looked, but there's no other bodies there." Loria's father, Jay, also recounted the last time he saw his daughter. "Loria asked me, 'Daddy, is it all right if I spend the night with Ashley at the Freeman's home?' I said, 'Just make sure you're home by noon tomorrow.' But noon tomorrow didn't happen the way it should have." The fact that Kathy Freeman was the only body initially found in the burned home was strange, but the situation grew even more mysterious when it was determined that Kathy had died from a shotgun wound to the head, not from the fire. This led investigators to believe the fire was intentionally set and that the missing individuals had been abducted. The day after the fire, Lauria's parents returned to the Freeman house to search for any clues that might lead them to their daughter. To their surprise, they discovered another body, which had been missed during the initial search. This body was later identified as Danny Freeman, Ashley's father and Kathy's husband. Like Kathy, Danny had also been killed by a shotgun blast. Laureen described the gruesome discovery, noting, "He didn't have anything from the upper teeth all the way to the top of his head." That same day, authorities found Lauria's purse, which contained her driver's license and a few $100s in cash, reinforcing the belief that Lauria had been abducted. With Ashley's remains still missing, it was likely that she had also been taken. As months passed with little progress in the case, rumors began to circulate about a possible feud between the Freemans and the local sheriff's office. This speculation stemmed from the death of Danny's son, Shane, who had been shot and killed by an officer after stealing a truck and firearm from a neighbor. Although Shane's death was ruled justifiable, the Freemans were reportedly planning to file a wrongful death lawsuit against the law enforcement officers involved. This possibility gained traction when Danny's brother, Dwayne, shared a chilling memory. "Danny put his finger in my face and said, 'If anything ever happens to me, look at the sheriff's department,' and he was serious. He was in my face to drive it home with me." Dwayne added that authorities had threatened the family, claiming they could do whatever they wanted to them at any time. Despite this, polygraph tests administered to the sheriff's office staff cleared them of any involvement in the case. Another theory suggested that Danny Freeman was involved in illegal substance dealing, and the fire may have been the result of a deal gone wrong. However, Special Agent Steve Nutter expressed doubt, stating, "If you wanted to consider that it was substance-related, nothing fits correctly. The very last thing that people who committed the murders would want to do would be to abduct the children." Over time, additional theories emerged, but a significant revelation came when a death row inmate named Jeremy Jones confessed to the murders of Danny and Kathy Freeman. When asked about his motive, Jeremy claimed he was repaying a favor to a friend. He also stated that he had taken Ashley and Lauria to Kansas, where he shot them and left their bodies in an abandoned mine. Although Jeremy provided authorities with the exact location of the mine, a thorough search of the area yielded no evidence of the girls, and Jeremy later recanted his confession, admitting he had lied to gain better food and privileges. In April 2018, another person of interest emerged, 66-year-old Ronnie Dean Busick. He was arrested and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. The case against Ronnie also implicated 2 other men, Warren Welsh II and David Pennington, both of whom were deceased at the time. Witnesses came forward, claiming that Ronnie, Warren, and David had bragged about killing Ashley and Lauria, and that the girls were held in Warren's trailer for several days before being killed. The witnesses even reported that the men had shared Polaroids of the girls. The motive, according to these accounts, was that the Freemans were killed over substance money. Warren's girlfriend later informed police that he had kept a briefcase containing the Polaroids in question. In July 2020, Ronnie Busick pleaded guilty to being an accessory to the first-degree murders of Danny and Kathy Freeman, as well as to setting the fire and abducting Ashley and Lauria. He received a 15-year sentence, with 10 years to be served in prison and the remaining 5 on probation. However, Ronnie was released early in May 2023 for good behavior, serving less than 4 years of his 10-year prison sentence. While the culprits have been identified, the whereabouts of Ashley and Lauria's remains remain unknown. It seems that the truth may have died with Warren and David, if they were indeed involved. Daniel Gallardo was reported missing on October 28, 2015. He had been staying in Reno with his cousin for the past 2 days and was supposed to start a new job at Rock and Rose Incorporated on the day he disappeared. Daniel was on his way to Truckee but never arrived. His white Nissan Altima was last seen at a Chevron gas station in the area, but security cameras did not capture any images of him. According to the Barstow Police Department, Daniel's family has not heard from him since. The last purchase on his account was for $3.99 at Chevron, followed by another purchase for $20, likely for food and gas. Marlon Murillo, Daniel's high school girlfriend, was the last person to hear from him. They had been texting the day he went missing, and during their last phone call, she only heard him say hello before the call dropped. She tried calling him repeatedly, but eventually, his phone went dead. Murillo mentioned it was very unusual for him to stop texting like that. Investigators noted that Daniel did not have a criminal history and had no reason to be near the Prosser Creek Reservoir or to run away. Almost a year later, on October 5, 2016, his car was found deep in the forest, about 40 miles north of Truckee, by a hunter. Authorities have not disclosed much about the evidence found in the vehicle, only stating that they have not located Daniel. The discovery of the car prompted Shasta County deputies to search the area, but they did not find Daniel or any additional clues. Detectives investigating the case describe it as suspicious but have not provided further details. They are still determining if a crime was committed or if this remains a missing person case. Anyone with information is urged to contact the Barstow Police Department at 760-256-2211. In early May 2008, 18-year-old Josh Maddox left his home in Woodland Park, Colorado, for a casual walk. It was a routine act for Josh, who often wandered through the surrounding forests to clear his mind. But this particular walk would be his last, as he never returned home. Josh's family would never see him alive again, marking the beginning of a tragic and perplexing mystery. Joshua Vernon Maddox, born on March 9, 1990, was raised in Woodland Park, a small community roughly 20 miles northwest of Colorado Springs. Josh's upbringing was relatively idyllic, shared with his two sisters, Ruth and Kate, until his parents separated. Following the split, Josh, Ruth, and Kate lived with their father, Mike, but remained active and well-liked members of the community. By his teenage years, Josh had grown into a lanky young man with long hair, known for his free-spirited nature. Friends and family described him as a gifted musician, a good student, and a witty individual. Despite his outwardly cheerful demeanor, those close to Josh knew he was grappling with the emotional fallout from a family tragedy that occurred 2 years earlier. On May 8, 2008, Josh mentioned to his sister Kate that he was going out for a walk. Given his affinity for nature and his frequent solitary walks, Kate thought little of it. Josh's walks, often a form of self-therapy, were a common occurrence. He had always returned within a few hours, so his family was not immediately concerned when he did not come back by sundown. As night fell and Josh still had not returned, his father and sisters grew increasingly uneasy. The following morning, when Josh's bed remained empty, their worry escalated. They reasoned that he might have decided to camp in the woods or stay overnight at a friend's house without informing them. However, as days passed with no word from Josh, his family began a desperate search, reaching out to his friends, visiting familiar haunts, and checking local homeless shelters, fearing he might have had a breakdown. Despite their exhaustive efforts, Josh remained missing. On May 13, 5 days after his disappearance, Mike Maddox reported his son missing to the local police. During the investigation, the delay in reporting Josh missing may seem unusual, but it reflected the family's altered dynamics following the death of Josh's older brother 2 years prior. Each family member coped differently, often seeking solitude as a means of processing their grief. Both official and unofficial searches ensued, spanning the dense woods and the local area, but yielded no clues to Josh's whereabouts. Criticism arose regarding the police department's seemingly indifferent attitude towards the case. As Josh was legally an adult, his disappearance was not immediately treated as suspicious, particularly since there was no evidence suggesting foul play. Amidst the growing uncertainty, Josh's family clung to hope. Kate, in particular, found solace in past conversations with her brother. Josh had often spoken about embarking on a grand adventure, hinting that he might need to disappear temporarily to pursue his dreams. These recollections led Kate to believe that Josh could have joined a band and gone on tour, or simply sought a fresh start far from the memories of Woodland Park. Josh's father, on the other hand, harbored darker suspicions. He believed that the trauma of his brother's death had deeply affected Josh, potentially driving him to the edge. This, coupled with the family history of depression, fueled concerns that Josh might have followed a similar tragic path. Despite these fears, there was no concrete evidence to suggest that Josh had succumbed to the same fate as his brother. As time dragged on, the Maddox family faced the harsh reality that finding Josh alive seemed increasingly unlikely. His missing person case remained open, a stark reminder of life abruptly interrupted and a family left in perpetual limbo. Josh Maddox's disappearance in May 2008 remains a haunting enigma. His departure on what appeared to be an ordinary walk turned into a long-lasting mystery that continues to bewilder his family and the tight-knit community of Woodland Park. Despite exhaustive searches and lingering hopes, Josh's fate remains unresolved, a somber testament to the fragility of life and the enduring pain of uncertainty. Nearly 50 years before Josh's disappearance, Chuck Murphy bought land in Woodland Park, home to the notorious Thunderhead Ranch. The ranch, once owned by Big Bert Bergstrom, was known for its illicit activities. On this land, Chuck built a cabin used by his brother until 2005. By 2015, the deteriorated cabin was set for demolition. During the demolition, a decomposed body was found in the chimney. Chuck called the authorities, and dental records identified the body as Josh Maddox. He was in a fetal position, head first in the chimney, wearing only a thermal shirt. The coroner ruled Josh's death accidental, suggesting he likely died from hypothermia or dehydration after entering the chimney from the roof. There were no signs of trauma or drugs. However, details raised questions. Rebar mesh over the chimney was missing, the chimney was blocked by a breakfast bar from inside, and Josh's clothes were neatly folded near the fireplace, implying he was inside the cabin before entering the chimney. Suspicion fell on Andrew Richard Newman, a friend of Josh, known for violent behavior. He was in prison when Josh's body was found, but no evidence connected him to the death. Despite the accidental ruling, the strange details leave doubt and mystery over Josh Maddox's death. Chon Yuen Kim was a woman whose tragic fate came to light on February 14, 1988, when her body was discovered under suspicious circumstances. From the outset, police suspected foul play, believing that she had likely died from asphyxiation. In the early stages of the investigation, a man, who has since passed away, reportedly confessed to her murder. However, despite this confession, he was never formally charged, leaving many questions unanswered. Kim's story began in Korea, where she was born and raised before moving to Georgia in the United States less than 10 years before her untimely death. For decades, her identity remained a mystery, only being uncovered in October 2023. Before this breakthrough, she was known only as an unidentified woman found in a duffel bag, her name and life story lost to the world. The discovery of Kim's body was both shocking and gruesome. A man scavenging for cans happened upon a dumpster where he found a closed duffel bag. When he opened it, he was horrified to realize that he had likely found a body. Panicked, he fled to his car and called the police. It was later rumored that another person had noticed a foul odor, possibly of decomposition, about a week before the man found her remains. Kim's body was wrapped in bedding and tape before being stuffed into the duffel bag. The autopsy presented significant challenges due to the condition of her remains. Her face was unrecognizable, making it difficult to determine her race at first. Although the exact cause of death was not initially clear, investigators strongly suspected asphyxiation, potentially involving a pillow found with her remains. There were no visible signs of trauma. Early forensic sketches of the victim were acknowledged by investigators as being somewhat inaccurate, yet they still provided valuable clues. Some people came forward with information suggesting that the woman might have been from Korea. In 1991, a man named Johnny Young, who had been a person of interest since 1988, called investigators and confessed to the murder. He claimed that he and Kim were acquaintances, although this was never confirmed. When authorities tracked Johnny down in New Jersey, he denied making the phone call and later passed away, further complicating the case. Unfortunately, the remains of the victim were cremated before samples could be retained for future DNA analysis. Despite this setback, investigators were able to identify her as Chung Yuen Kim in October 2023, thanks to the well-preserved blanket found with her body. Kim had immigrated to the United States from Korea in 1981 and had been living in Hinesville, Georgia. Although Johnny Young was never definitively proven to be the killer, the investigation into Kim's death remains open. Authorities are actively seeking new leads to piece together the truth behind this long unsolved case, hoping to bring justice to Chung Yuen Kim.